I want to be sure that people out there have an idea, especially my clients, or at least people in the Philadelphia area, but certainly even across the country. Money's a weird thing. I always say, like, money's not really a natural thing. But when it comes to a mortgage, I always tell people, like, the bank never forgets, man. The bank never forgets to send that payment. Most people don't pay off their house. There are times when people fall behind. And when they fall behind, it can be very stressful. The reasons why people fall behind on their mortgage and what to do about it. Welcome back to another episode of Moving Sucks. I'm your host, Seth. Happy New Year. Recording on this on January 5th. I'm hopeful wherever you are warm, because it is not warm here in Philadelphia. It is dreary. It is 30 degrees, and I think that's the high today. But I wanted to talk today about something that's a little more sensitive. It's something that I don't talk about a lot, and I want to be sure that the people out there have an idea, especially my clients, or at least people in the Philadelphia area, but certainly even across the country. Something you don't talk about at cocktail parties. I'm sure you didn't talk about this at Christmas, New Year's Eve, whatever. You don't talk to your boss. Sometimes you don't even talk to your wife about it. Is falling behind on your mortgage. There is a cohort of people out there that I know are struggling with their mortgage, and there is relief. There are certain things that you can do, certainly proactively. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And money's a weird thing. I always say, like, money's not really a natural thing. We invented it. We invented it in order to expand the economy. Almost on a limitless basis, which has brought a lot of prosperity, but it also creates a lot of scarcity. So my theories and pontifications on the monetary system is for another day. If anybody ever wants to talk about it, I'm game. But my point is that the American consumer and consumers in general have different relationships to money and their money mindset. So people sometimes misjudge how much money they have or how much they can afford, or they give away all their money and they just enjoy giving it away. And there's not a whole lot of scarcity surrounding that part of their lives. But when it comes to a mortgage, I always tell people, like, the bank never forgets, man. The bank never forgets to send that payment. And so it's like a tide. It shows up in your mailbox every single month. And so when we put people into homes, we always try to be extra sure that this is a payment they can afford. We don't worry about price. I mean, we do, but we don't. We focus on payment because that's the thing that's going to affect your life for the next 36 or 360 months. Now, most people don't pay off their house. They don't pay off 30-year mortgages, but in the aggregate of life, they have a mortgage for that amount of time. 30 years, whether they're buying five or six houses, they have a mortgage payment every month. So anytime we put people into a home, we want to make sure that there are some guardrails. And if it's dual income, it's like, hey, listen, if one of you guys lost your job, like, would you guys have the savings to float this mortgage plus your living expenses until someone else found a job? Or even better, it's like, listen, could one of you retire or one of you not work, and still could you afford this mortgage? So we try to really dive deep and ask those questions because we want to do something that we want to do this responsibly. We don't want to be reckless. We don't want to just put people into homes just because they can afford it that day. But there are times when people fall behind. And when they fall behind, it can be very stressful. I have seen all different kinds of things. I'm actually a short sale and foreclosure expert. I have my designation. In the past 4 or 5 years, I haven't needed it too much because a lot of people have been flushed with cash. Jobs, unemployment rate has largely been low, and interest rates were low. So a lot of people got in these payments that are super affordable, and even if they lost their job, they weren't worrying about anything. But that has changed as in October it flipped. There are more people with 6% plus mortgages than sub 3% mortgages. So that will over time will get that over time will actually get worse. There's going to be more and more people at a higher interest rate. Just as people sell homes, they get out of the 2% and they get up into the 6% because they have to get a new mortgage. Over time, that's got that top end of interest rates is going to expand. So that's going to put a little bit more stress on people. Hopefully, those people are buying houses that are they can afford. But wanted today to go over the um, today I wanted to go over the reasons why people fall behind on their mortgage and what to do about it. So, number one reason is going to be job loss. That is by far the most acute way. It's the most abrupt. It's the most stressful. Most people don't lose their jobs by choice. They don't quit. They are let go. So we want to talk about that a little bit in terms of like, what do you do when you lose your job? Do you have the savings in order to float your mortgage and pay for the rest of your life? So you should have what's called an emergency fund. Okay. Now that should be a fund that I actually that personally I keep like in a totally different bank, because I want to make sure that that's like not something I'm like even tempted to tap. Luckily, I'm at the point where I'm able to have that account and not really worry about cash on hand, income, that type of thing. But there are people who get in, like what we talk about is getting in thin, right? And that is a normal thing of home buying where you get in, you jump up and you grab it. It's not always most the comfortable thing, but the idea is you get in, you lock the payment in, and your income over time will go up. And actually that payment becomes like a very, very easy thing to pay. But job loss is like all of a sudden your income goes to zero. So in that case, you want to be able to assure yourself that you would be able to handle an extended job loss. But if you fall behind on your mortgage, if that's the reason, you should be calling your servicer as soon as you feel that there's going to be a problem. Like if you get out there and you're interviewing, or you're in like right now, like pharmaceuticals, like pharma is like really in flux. If you feel that you're going to fall behind or you're close, you definitely want to call your servicer, your bank, and just let them know like, hey, things have changed. The other one is another reason why people will fall behind is because in some areas of the country, taxes and escrows and insurance are going through the roof. So you get in, you got a $3,500 a month payment. It goes to $4,300 a month because sometimes people are getting their insurance doubled. They lose their insurance. They have to go get new insurance because the roof's too old. Sometimes insurance carriers just cancel because they move out of the area. They don't insure in that area. And then also taxes are getting reassessed because the values of homes are going up. Also, taxes are just going up because the cost, as inflation and the cost of things go up, municipalities and counties and states and the government, like things cost more. They need to cover the costs of operating. Now, taxes and government and everything like that, that's not what we're going to talk about, but that would be their justification, is that like, listen, the diesel fuel or the snow plows or the chains or the tree guys or whatever, all the people that are involved in the township, those costs go up for them as well, and they pass that on to the homeowner. So insurance and taxes can sometimes go up. There are not also another way your payment can go up is if you're an adjustable rate mortgage. I've not seen a ton of those. I would not recommend them unless they're in really specific circumstances. I believe we've talked about this on the podcast before, but adjustable rate mortgages are they were really a feature of the Great Recession, and a lot of people got away from them. And you don't really make that much more money, or you don't save that much more money by doing that. Most people want to just lock in 30 years and then forget about it. The other one is just general lifestyle creep, overextension. Very common. I love this quote, and I think it's a Dave Ramsey one where it's like, don't try to keep up with the Joneses. The Joneses are broke. So, the guy across the street, you kind of know what he does. You kind of know what he makes probably based on your experience. And you're like, he pulls in with a new car. There is something that happens in the human brain, especially like middle and upper middle class, is that they try to keep up with, well, hey, I guess if he hey, that Audi in the driveway across the street, if he can afford that, like I probably can too, man. Like, I'm sure he did all the research, right? And like knows exactly how, he's being responsible. So, but people will look at things and be like, oh, they're on vacation. They bought a car. They had a million Christmas presents for their kids. And people compare themselves to others. And that overextension in relation to a payment can sometimes get a little askew. And really what it comes down to is a lot of the stuff goes on credit first. And then that credit card bill goes way up. The interest rate is very high. And people just kind of lose control of their budget. And it's just overextension. And I believe that that is going to be, other than job loss, is probably going to be your most pervasive reason why someone falls behind. And job loss is like, you can point to that thing and be like, that's why I'm behind. Overextension and lifestyle creep is like, you just made a series of bad decisions. You decide to live a lifestyle you can't quite afford. But the real problem is when you're overextended, then you lose your job, because then that's when automatically you are right into panic mode. And I want to talk a little bit about what you would want to do in that case. So generally the foreclosure process, or at least the delinquency process, is you pay your mortgage. Usually there's a 15-day grace period. So you're out of town or whatever, something gets lost in the mail, you usually get a 15-day grace period to pay without having the bank really care. At 15 days, they will notify you that you're 15 days late. Then at 30 days, if you don't pay by then, you get a hit on your credit. And it's basically a mortgage late. Mortgage late automatically, in almost all cases, disqualifies you from getting any other mortgage for 12 months. A mortgage late, if you do it in February, they won't issue a loan until February of the next year, because if you're defaulting on the payment you're trying to, on the debt that you're trying to get, that's a big problem. 30 days late is when you get a hit on your credit, and then you're definitely on the radar for the bank, because 30 days isn't like you're on vacation or something got lost in the mail. That means like you just didn't pay it. After that, in most states, at least in Pennsylvania, I know there's a 90-day window. So it is called a default notice. That is actually a legal action. And that is when things really get not interesting, but that's when things get really serious, because a foreclosure is generally a legal action. They've had to go to a judge. They've had to go get an issue because the bank is basically saying, hey, this guy is not fulfilling the contract. That's all a mortgage is a contract. He is failing and he's defaulting on his contract. We want to be able to start proceedings in order to take the house back. Generally, though, it's about 180 days from when you default that you will then really start getting hounded and really, really start down a road that it's going to be really hard to get back off of. So what I want to talk to you guys a little bit about today is like, what do you do when you fall behind on your mortgage? The biggest mistake I see people make is wait. And I mentioned it when we talked about income loss. The reason I mentioned it during that reason is because if you don't feel like you're going to get a job back, you want to get way out ahead of calling your servicer. Okay. So you don't want to you can call your mortgage lender. I always tell my clients, you can always call me. I have had clients who've called me and said, listen, I don't know how to tell Ashley or Katie or whatever. I don't know how to tell my wife. I handle all the finances and she doesn't know. But like, I haven't paid the mortgage in 2 months and we're really behind. And like, I always tell my clients, like, you can always just call me. Like, I'm a vault. I don't really I'm not interested in gossip, but I want to be able to help you, want to be able to empower you, talk to you about how, like what I just went over is how this whole process works. And there's a healing aspect to this, where if you just tell somebody your secret, which is a foreclosure or you're behind on your mortgage, it does give the brain like a kind of room to breathe a little bit. But I almost always, in that case, I ask them, well, do you have assets just to get current? If it's no, if usually with these types of situations, there's credit card debt, there's other debt, there's car payment, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, can we shed any debt? If that's like, no, I mean, if we send the car back, I'm gonna have to buy it back. It's going to be really expensive. I don't have the cash to do it. Then it's really about calling the servicer, and just explaining what's happening. They take notes, they put it into your file, and these notes are recorded throughout the thing. So you want to start building like kind of almost like a case, being like, listen, he was 25 days late before the mortgage late. He called, like, if the bank will look at that and say, okay, he's been working with us. He's been proactive. He hasn't just like ghosted us. He hasn't abandoned the property. He hasn't just decided not to call us or communicate. This is the thing, guys. The banks don't want your property. They don't want your property. There is a narrative out there that there's this like these big banks are going to come lurching through your neighborhood and scoop up houses and kick you out and everything like that. They don't want it. And the reason is because in the recession, these banks took a beating taking all these houses back. So they were the servicers, the Bank of America and the Wells Fargo. They had to take all these houses back. They lost their ass. They had to pay they had to pay a broker to sell them. They had to maintain them. They had to pay insurance. They had to pay taxes on them. And in a foreclosure setting, generally, that means there's others out there. So there's high inventory, which means they can't sell them, and they have to sell them at a loss at times. Now, if that person had a lot of equity, and the mortgage is low on the property, like if you have a $400,000 house, but there's only $150,000 owed, that's okay. But they generally just dump the property back because they just want to be done with it. But the banks don't want your property. So if you can get out ahead of it and talk to them about what's going on, what you plan to do, what your options are, there are things that you can discuss with them. One is forbearance. So forbearance was a big thing during COVID. Everybody kind of lost their job in COVID, and then everyone kind of got them back hopefully 90 to 120 days later. In that case, what they do is they basically wipe the slate clean from when you went delinquent to then, and then they attach it all to the back of the mortgage with almost it's a second lien usually, and it's a 0%. It's basically like a junior lien, second lien on the back end of a primary mortgage. So that's important to know, because when you go to sell that house, when you go and you get your first mortgage payoff statement, it's this is how much you owe. There's usually a little bit left there's usually another debt. So you always want to ask yourself, have I ever had one of these workarounds? When you go to sell the house, let's say you go delinquent and then you get a job and everything's fine. You always want to ask yourself, did you go into forbearance? Because what they do is they attach to the back side of the loan as a second lien. The other thing you can potentially do is a loan modification. So sometimes banks will work with you on, a payment plan or, bringing you just current. A loan modification is a more involved process. It's not always an option, but it's something you should talk to them about. And you can always call me or call your realtor, call your lender, call somebody about it, even ChatGPT, the damn thing, just to get an idea of what you're talking about when you get on them. Repayment plans, people will be put on a payment plan just to, if you've had an interruption of income, let's say your wife or your husband has lost their job and you have diminished income, they will allow for a certain, lesser payment. Because again, guys, these banks don't want your house. They don't want to go through the hassle. And I won't go into the whole process of asset managers and REO and, BPOs and all this stuff that happens behind the scenes. But just remember that if calling the bank is not a forfeiture, it is not a failure, it is actually the smartest thing you can do. And when you tell the bank, hey, this is what's going on, and you get somebody who's well-intentioned on the phone and they're okay, yeah, okay, we'll work with that. That gives you just some mental break too, emotional break. But it also empowers you. If you have not told your spouse or told the people you need to tell, you can say, I called the bank. We're we got a plan. This is what it is. I want to bring you in on it. And this is what we got to do. Definitely know your equity position before you call. If you have a lot of equity, this is less of a problem because you can always just dispose of the house. If you do not have a lot of equity, which is people with FHA loans, people with VA loans, I love our vets. I almost will. It's really hard. I will almost never recommend 100% financed VA loan, because if you do that, you're not going to have enough time to build equity if you have to move within the next 3-4 years. Because by the time you pay transfer tax and realtors and moving costs and all that, you're probably going to lose money if you have no money down on that thing. So if you don't have a lot of money, so if you're 3% down, you're 3.5% down, you're 0% down, like USDA and VA is 0% down, FHA is 3.5%. There's a first-time home buyer 3% down, 97% LTV program. I always ask them what they do, what they're, how firm they feel in their job, because they have to start building equity very quickly. So it's important to know exactly what your equity position is, because like I said, the more equity you have, the more options you have. Also, the more equity you have, the more options they have, the bank has to help you. But don't default like emotionally. Okay. Shame causes silence, and silence causes shame. You don't tell someone your secret. It just festers, and the brain doesn't work properly that way. If you start telling the right people what is going on, like me or your lender or the servicer, there are options out there for you. So I just want to get on here and just talk about that a little bit. It's a sensitive subject. It's usually highly, highly emotionally charged. People see it as a failure, and it's not, because especially if you've had like an external event happen, like a job loss, or you got, your payment kept going up. This is a big thing in down south with insurance costs, and also with taxes. So when there's a whole glut of homes built, the municipalities usually underestimate how much infrastructure they need. You can't just put 350 houses on a piece of land, and you need wider roads. You need more sewer capacity. There's going to be more development. Schools need to be expanded. Hospitals need to be expanded. So people don't realize, when you go into one of those areas with a ton of new construction, usually taxes will go up, because the municipality has to build all the infrastructure to service and get those people on and off the roads, get their kids back and forth to school. They need more buses. They need, more pumps at the water station, whatever. So just keep that in mind. So if there's anyone out there who feels that they're going to fall behind, they're worried about a layoff, they're worried about, maybe this lifestyle creep where they're just in over their head, and they're worried about they're not going to be able to pay their mortgage, this is a good time to reset for 2026 and get a plan together. And you can stay in your house a lot of times. This is not about vacating. I never underestimate the fact that this is a pretty public, like, kind of not failure, but like display of like, okay, unless you want to just tell people you're moving for a different reason, but usually that's another thing. It's like, I can't let the neighbors know like that, there's a foreclosure. I don't want the bank coming and, putting a neon yellow sign on my front door, basically saying like, this is, up for foreclosure or share sale. So the best thing is to be proactive. So I hope you guys find that helpful. Anybody out there who needs any help, even if you're not a client, you live in Arkansas or Alaska or whatever, you can always contact me at Movie Sucks Podcast or at Seth Anything on Instagram. And I'd be happy to help. Thanks, guys. See you.